Which duelist had the ultimate deck in Duelist Kingdom? We're about to dive into the most epic power ranking you've ever seen, from the weakest strategies to the most unbeatable combos. Get ready to relive the thrills of this classic tournament as we break down each duelist's deck, their best cards, and how they crushed or got crushed by their opponents. Now, to help me rank these iconic Duelist Kingdom decks, I have the legends Blue and Delta from the YGO Anime Games channel, who specialize in character deck duels, deck profiles, and top 10s of their own. Now, before we start, drop your top 5 Duelist Kingdom decks down in the comments and see if it matches ours. Now, let's get into the ranking. Alright, let's dive into one of the most unexpected dueling strategies in Duelist Kingdom. This is the story of a young boy desperate to save his brother, resorting to theft. That's right, we're talking about Mokuba Kaiba and his stolen deck. Now, you might think that swiping cards would give Mokuba a leg up, but hold on to your duel discs, because this deck was far from a powerhouse. Yeah, let's break it down. Mokuba's stolen deck included cards like Crocodilus and Man-Eating Plant, which they sound fierce, right? But they're not. They're really not. Crocodilus might look cool, but with an attack of only 1,200, it's about as threatening as a rubber duck in a bathtub. And Man-Eating Plant, it's more like, oh, Man-Eating Plant. These cards, they just couldn't cut it in a serious duel. But here's the thing, Mokuba's plan wasn't just weak because of the cards. His whole strategy was like trying to win a car race with a tricycle. Because say if he'd stolen a good deck with strong cards, well, he was still up against seasoned duelists with well-crafted decks, and he was throwing down cards he barely understood. But before we judge Mokuba too harshly, let's remember why he did all this. This kid was willing to risk it all to help his brother Seto. That's some serious family loyalty right there. It might not have been the smartest move, but you've got to admire the heart behind it.
Alright, let's talk about a duelist who brought friendship to the forefront. You might think cute cuddly monsters can't pack a punch, but Gardner's deck proved that assumption dead wrong. How does she turn these adorable creatures into formidable foes? Well, it's time to find out. Teya's deck was all about fairy-type monsters. We're talking cards like Petite Angel, Shining Friendship, and Happy Lover. Now, I know what you're thinking. These sound more like stuffed animals than duel monsters. But here's the thing. Teya actually knew how to make these little guys shine. See, Teya didn't just rely on her monster's cuteness. She had some serious spell and trap game going on. Cards like Breath of Light and Elf's Light gave her fairies a power boost, while D-Spell helped her shut down her opponent's strategies, and she even had Magician of Faith, her favorite card and her only non-fairy monster, to recycle these potent spells. And let's not forget about Wapaku, the perfect card for keeping her monsters safe on the field. Now, Teya faced some serious ridicule for her deck choice. I mean, you can imagine the look on Mai Valentine's face when Teya busted out these fluffy creatures. But Teya didn't let that shake her. She knew that with the right combo of spells and traps, her fairies could hold their own against even the toughest monsters, like Mai's powered-up Harpy ladies. Sure, Teya's deck had its weaknesses. Fairy-type monsters often had lower attack points, which could be a problem in head-to-head battles. But Teya's smart use of defensive strategies like Wapaku showed that she understood sometimes the best offense is a good defense.
Alright, buckle up duelists, because we're about to dive into the creepy world of Bones and his zombie horde. This guy took the phrase, "what doesn't kill you makes you stronger," to a whole new level. Bones' deck was all about bringing the dead back to life, and let me tell you, it was no joke. His go-to strategy was the trap card Call of the Haunted. This bad boy allowed Bones to revive non-zombie monsters as zombie types, making them basically immortal. And get this, every time these undead creatures were destroyed, they came back even stronger. Talk about a nightmare for his opponent. But here's the thing, Bones' deck wasn't just about mindless zombies. He had some serious firepower with monsters like Armored Zombie, Dragon Zombie, and the Snake Hare. And let's not forget about Pumpkin, the King of Ghosts, which could power up all of his other monsters even more. It's like Bones had his own little undead army, each monster feeding off the other's strength. Now, you might be thinking, sounds pretty unstoppable, right? Well, not so fast. See, Bones' deck had a big weakness. It was kind of a one-trick pony. His whole strategy revolved around Call of the Haunted and its revival tactics. If an opponent could find a way to counter that, well, Bones was in very big trouble.
Alright, let's dive into the deep end with Mako Tsunami's deck. This guy wasn't just playing with water, he was unleashing the full fury of the ocean on his opponents. Mako's strategy was all about using the field to his advantage, and boy, did he make a splash with it. Mako strategically dueled near water. This gave his sea creatures power boosts at left and right. We're talking monsters like Fiend Kraken, Great White Terror, and Kuryushin, becoming absolute powerhouses. It's like they're swimming in their own personal steroid pool. But here's the thing, Mako's reliance on field advantage was kind of like building a sandcastle too close to the tide. Sure, it looks impressive, but one big wave and it's game over. In his duel against Yugi, Mako thought he had the upper hand by hiding his monsters in the ocean and boosting their attack power, but Yugi, being the clever duelist he is, used Mystical Moon to mess with the tides and leave Mako's strategy high and dry. Now you might be thinking, but isn't the water deck super strong? Well, yes and no. Water decks can be killer when the conditions are right, but they often struggle when they can't control the field. It's like bringing a surfboard to a skateboard competition. Great if there's a wave, not so great on dry land. But let's give credit where it's due. Mako wasn't just some fish out of water in the tournament. His deck perfectly matched his dueling style and his personal motivations. This guy was out there trying to win so he could buy a fishing boat and continue his father's legacy. Talk about dedication.
Alright, let's shine a light on one of the most intimidating duelists in Duelist Kingdom. Panik. This guy wasn't just playing cards, he was playing mind games. Panik's deck was all about striking fear into the hearts of his opponents, and let me tell you, it was pretty effective. At first. So, what made Panik's deck so terrifying? Well, it all centered around his key card, the Castle of Dark Illusions. This floating fortress didn't just look creepy, it actually shrouded Panik's monsters in shadows, making them invisible to his opponents. Talk about a home field advantage, but that's not all. The castle also gave Panik's monsters a power boost, making them even tougher to beat. Now, let's talk about Panik's monster lineup. We're talking fiend-type creatures that would give anyone nightmares. Cards like Reaper of the Cards, Barox, Dark Chimera, and the King of Yamimakai. These weren't your average duel monsters. They were designed to freak out Panik's opponents before the duel even started. But here's the thing about Panik's strategy. It was like a house of cards. Sure, it looked impressive, but one strong gust of wind and the whole thing came tumbling down. If it wasn't being held up by swords of revealing light, of course. So yeah, when Panik faced off against Yami Yugi, his intimidation tactics, well, they just didn't cut it. Yami called out Panik's cowardly approach, saying that true strength comes from facing your opponents head on, not hiding in the shadows.
We're digging into the next duelist on our Duelist Kingdom power ranking. Let's talk about Rex Raptor and his Dynamite deck. Now, Rex wasn't messing around when it came to raw power. His strategy was all about unleashing prehistoric beasts on his opponents. We're talking big bad dinosaurs that can make even the toughest duelists shake in their boots. But here's the question. Was all that muscle enough to stomp the competition? Rex's deck was packed with some serious heavy hitters. He had cards like Two-Headed King Rex, Sword Arm of Dragon, and Mega Zowler that could dish out some serious damage. But the crown jewel of his deck, that would be the Red Eyes Black Dragon. This bad boy wasn't just for show. It packed a punch that could turn the tide of any duel. And let's not forget about Serpent Eye Dragon, which was nearly as strong. But Rex really was all about power and raw strength. He had the equipped spell Dragon Nails, which could boost Red Eyes up to 3,000 attack. That's enough to take on Blue Eyes, if Rex would have had the misfortune of facing Kaiba. Rex's strategy was pretty straightforward. Hit hard and hit fast. To help his strategy, he even used the dueling field to give his dinos an extra boost. It's like he was trying to recreate Jurassic Park right there on the dueling platform. Now, you might be thinking, that sounds pretty awesome. And yeah, it was when it worked. But here's the catch. Rex's deck only had one strategy. Sure, it could deliver some earth-shaking attacks, but it didn't have much in the way of versatility. This became super clear in Rex's duel against Joey Wheeler when Joey managed to turn the tables on Rex. He used some smart tactics to make those big, stomping dinos extinct. It just goes to show that sometimes brains beat brawn, even when that brawn is 65 million years old.
Alright, duelists, we're about to crawl into the world of Weevil Underwood's deck. Now, you might think insects are no match for dragons and spellcasters, but this duelist nearly turned the whole tournament upside down with his creepy crawlers. How'd he do it? Well, let's find out. Weevil's strategy was all about swarming the field with insects and using tricky tactics to catch his opponents off guard. His deck was crawling with bug-themed cards like Killer Needle, Basic Insect, and Hercules Beetle, but the real star of the show was his Cocoon of Evolution. This card let Weevil evolve his Lava Moth into the powerful Great Moth. But Weevil wasn't just about big bugs. He had some sneaky moves up his sleeve too. He had cards that could stop opponents in their tracks, giving him time to set up stronger monsters. And let's not forget how he powered up his weaker insects with equipped cards like Laser Cannon Armor. Talk about a sting operation. Now, you might be thinking sounds pretty tough to beat. Well, not so fast. Weevil's deck had some big weaknesses. For one, it didn't have many strong magical trap cards. This made it hard for him to deal with opponents who could quickly take out his insects. Plus, his strategy did take time to set up, which left him vulnerable to much faster decks. We saw this play out in Weevil's duel against Yugi. Weevil thought he had it all in the bag after tossing Yugi's Exodia cards overboard, but his overconfidence came back to bite him. Yugi managed to outplay Weevil's insect army, leaving the bug boy with 0 life points and kicked out of the tournament.
Alright guys, let's dive into the dark and twisted world of Bakura's deck. This duelist strategy was as split as his personality, and boy, did it pack a punch. Bakura's deck was all about disruption and control, making it a real nightmare for his opponents. So, what made Bakura's deck so terrifying? Well, it was loaded with cards designed to mess with his opponent's game plan. We're talking about cards like Morphine Jar, Man-Eater Bug, and White Magical Hat. These bad boys weren't just there to look scary, they were all about controlling the field and throwing a wrench in the other duelist's strategy. But here's where it gets really interesting. In the Duelist Kingdom, Bakura took things to a whole new level. He exploited the conditions of his shadow game against Yami Yugi, using just desserts to deal massive damage when Yugi had multiple monsters on the field. Talk about playing dirty. One of Bakura's key moves was using Change of Heart to take control of his opponent's monsters. This strategy almost worked against Yami Yugi, but the real Bakura spirit stepped in and messed up the plan. It just goes to show how Bakura's split personality influences dueling style. Now you might be wondering, was Bakura's deck actually any good? Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. His disruptive deck could definitely throw his opponents off their game, but it lacked the raw power and consistency of other decks. This weakness made it a bit less reliable.
Let's take a wild ride into the world of the Paradox Brothers. These guys weren't just any old duelists, they were a tag team terror that turned the whole game on its head. Like, imagine transforming the entire field into a giant board game. Sounds crazy, right? Well, that's exactly what the Paradox Brothers did with their Labyrinth strategy. And these bros weren't messing around. Their decks were like two halves of the same brain, working together to create some seriously powerful combos. The star of the show? The Labyrinth Wall card. This bad boy turned the field into a maze that would make even the Minotaur scratch his head. But they didn't stop there. The brothers had their sights on summoning the big gun. Yes, the Gate Guardian. Now, you might be thinking, wow, this sounds pretty unbeatable, but hold up, because there is a twist. See, while the Paradox Brothers strategy was unique, it also had some major weak spots too. Their whole game plan revolved around very specific combos and that labyrinth setup, and you know what happens when you put your eggs in one basket? Yeah, sometimes they crack and you lose them all. In their duel against Yugi and Joey, the brothers initially had the upper hand. Their tag team approach let them use the labyrinth strategy to full effect, and it looks like our heroes were in trouble. But here's the thing about predictable strategies. Smart opponents can figure them out. Yugi and Joey managed to adapt and then turn the tables on these brothers.
Alright guys, let's dive in the world of Joey Wheeler, the underdog with a heart of gold. Now, you might think Joey's deck was just a random pile of cards, but there's more to it than meets the eye. Sure, his strategy started off a bit shaky, but as the tournament progressed, Joey's deck evolved into something truly special. Let's talk about Joey's ace monster, the Red Eyes Black Dragon. Joey also made use of this devastatingly strong dragon, and it became the cornerstone of his strategy. But here's where it gets interesting. Joey didn't just rely on brute force, he also had some tricks up his sleeve, like Time Wizard. This little clock could turn the tide of a duel in an instant, aging up monsters or wiping the field clean. But Joey's deck wasn't all about flashy monsters. As he learned more about the game, he started adding trap and magic cards to his arsenal. This made his deck more balanced and unpredictable. Remember that duel against Bandit Keith? Joey pulled off an amazing play by using Grave Robber to snatch Keith's Time Machine card. And against Bones, it was Shield and Sword that made all of Bones' monsters have 0 attack for Joey to win. Talk about turning the tables. Now, I know what you're thinking, but how did Joey's deck stack up against the big shots? Well, let me tell you, Joey's deck had a secret weapon, the power of comebacks. This guy could be down to his last few life points and still pull off a win. Just look at his duel against Mai Valentine. Against all odds, Joey managed to outplay her and come out on top.
Now let's talk about Mai Valentine, the Harpy queen with a deck as hot as she was. Now, you might think that her deck was just about pretty bird ladies, but there's more to it than meets the eye. Mai's strategy was like a well-oiled machine, combining speed and power to overwhelm her opponents. Of course, Mai's deck revolved around her signature card, the Harpy Lady. But here's the thing, she didn't just rely on one Harpy. Mai had 3 copies of this winged warrior in her deck, ready to swarm the field. And when things got tough, she could bring out the big guns with Harpy Lady's sisters and Harpy's pet dragon. But Mai wasn't content with just summoning monsters. She boosted her Harpy's power with equipped spell cards like Rose Whip and Cyber Shield. This combo turned her Harpies from pesky birds into formidable threats. And get this, Mai's strategy was all about duplicating these powered up Harpies to create a feathered army. And let's not forget about the other powerful cards at her disposal, such as Mirror Wall. So you might be wondering, well, was Mai's deck unstoppable? Not quite. While her Harpy-focused deck was fast and furious, it did have some weak spots. Mai's reliance on her Harpies left her vulnerable to certain counter strategies. If an opponent could disrupt her swarming tactics, Mai could find herself in very hot water. Take her duel against Yugi for example. Mai put up a good fight with her Harpy's pet dragon and Harpy Lady's sisters, but when Yugi summoned his Blackluster soldier, it was game over for Mai's key monster. And let's not forget her match against Joey, where her strategies were countered effectively, leading to her defeat.
Alright, let's talk about Bandit Keith, the self-proclaimed intercontinental champion with a deck full of surprises, and not all of them legal. This guy's packing more metal than a junkyard, but is his reliance on machines and underhanded tactics his secret weapon or his ultimate downfall? Keith's deck is a powerhouse of mechanical monsters like Barrel Dragon, Blastsphere, and Slot Machine. These bad boys aren't just for show, they pack a serious punch, and Keith's spells and traps were just as strong. Pillager and Time Machine give him access to destroyed monsters or his opponent's cards. And don't forget his ace in the hole, 7 completed. This little number can turn his machines from scrap metal to unstoppable juggernauts. Now, you might be thinking, sounds pretty solid, right? Well, here's where things get interesting. Keith's strategy isn't just about brute force. He's got some tricky moves up his sleeve. Literally, this guy is known for hiding cards in his wristband and using a sneaky claw mechanism to draw exactly what he needs. Talk about stacking the deck. But here's the thing. All that cheating, it's like a rusty cog in an otherwise well-oiled machine. Sure, it gives Keith an edge, but it also shows he doesn't trust his own skills, and that lack of confidence, it's his Achilles heel. Take his duel against Joey Wheeler in the semifinals. Keith's slot machine, powered up by 7 completed, should have been unstoppable, but Joey, with some clever moves and a little help from Grave Robber, managed to turn the tables. It just goes to show, all the fancy tech in the world can't beat a good old-fashioned skill and heart.
Alright, it's time to talk about the king of games himself, Yugi Muto. This guy's got a deck that's more than just cards. It's got a soul. But here's the real question, is Yugi's success all about his deck, or is there something more at play? Let's break it down. Yugi's deck is like a Swiss army knife. It's got a tool for every situation. At its core, we've got the Dark Magician, Yugi's ace monster, but it's not just about raw power. Yugi's got tricks up his sleeve with cards like Mystic Box and the Book of Secret Arts to make his Dark Magician even more of a threat. However, Yugi's not just a one-trick pony. He's got other heavy hitters like Blackluster Soldier and the Magician of Black Chaos. These ritual monsters pack a serious punch and have turned the tide in some of Yugi's toughest duels. Now, what's really cool about Yugi's strategy is how he uses weaker monsters with powerful spell cards. Take Horn of the Unicorn, for example. Slap that on a low attack monster and suddenly you've got a real contender on the field. And let's not forget about cards like Sword of Revealing Light and Magical Hats. These cards can give Yugi the breathing room he needs to set up his game-winning plays. On top of that, he had cards like Mirror Force. That itself is a match-winning card. But on top of all of that, Yugi was not afraid to think outside the box. Remember his duel with Mako Tsunami? Yugi used his Giant Soldier of Stone to attack his own Mystical Moon card. It was a crazy play, but it totally messed up Mako's strategy and Yugi won the duel because of it. But here's the thing I really love about Yugi's deck. Though he lost Exodia early on, this forced him to adapt and rely more on his core cards. It's this ability to roll with the punches that really set Yugi apart.
It's time to talk about Seto Kaiba and his legendary Blue Eyes deck. This guy's strategy was all about pure, raw power. I mean, when you've got 3 copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon with its massive 3,000 attack points, you're not messing around. But Kaiba didn't stop there. He had other heavy hitters like Sword Stalker and Rabbit Horseman to back up his dragons. Now, Kaiba's whole game plan was to hit hard and fast. He wasn't about fancy combos or tricky plays. Nope, he just wanted to summon the biggest, baddest monsters and crush his opponents. And when one Blue Eyes wasn't enough, he'd use Polymerization to bring out the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon with its insane 4,500 attack points. Talk about overkill. But here's the thing, Kaiba's obsession with Blue Eyes might have been both his biggest strength and his biggest weakness. Sure, those dragons were crazy powerful, but what if your opponent had a way to counter them? Kaiba did try to mix things up sometimes. In his duel with Yugi, he used Saggy Dark Clown as bait for his crush card strategy. Pretty clever, right? Even though Kaiba wasn't officially part of the Duelist Kingdom tournament, his deck was still considered one of the strongest around. I mean, the guy was nearly undefeated before the events of Duelist Kingdom. That's pretty impressive. But when he faced off against Pegasus in a non-tournament duel, we saw the limits of his strategy. Pegasus could read Kaiba's mind with that creepy Millennium Eye, and suddenly all that raw power didn't matter so much.
Alright, top spot, let's talk about the mastermind behind Duelist Kingdom himself, Maximilian Pegasus. This guy's deck was just as wild as his personality, and trust me, that's saying something.
Oh no!
Pegasus built his strategy around the Toon World card, which let him summon these crazy cartoon versions of monsters that we all know and love. But here's the question, was his deck actually good, or was it all smoke and mirrors? Let's break it down. Pegasus had some seriously powerful Toon monsters like Blue Eyes Toon Dragon and Toon Summon Skull. These little animated troublemakers could dodge attacks and hit opponents directly. It's like trying to punch a cartoon character, you know, they just keep bouncing right back. But if that wasn't enough, Pegasus also had cards like Thousand Eyes Restrict and Relinquished that could steal his opponent's monsters. Talk about adding insult to injury with this deck, right? But here's the thing, Pegasus didn't just rely on his cards. He also had the creepy Millennium Eye that let him read minds. Essentially, Pegasus was dueling with cheat codes. In his duel with Yugi, Pegasus could see every card and strategy coming. It was no wonder why Pegasus was so hard to beat. So you might be thinking, this deck sounds unbeatable, but hold up, Pegasus did have some big weaknesses too. His whole strategy fell apart if someone could take out Toon World, and let's be real, without the Millennium Eye, was Pegasus really that great of a duelist? I'm sure he was, of course, but when Yugi's friends helped block out the mind reading, suddenly the playing field got a lot more even, right? But that's taking nothing away from his deck. He definitely had the strongest deck in Duelist Kingdom. Alright guys, that's a wrap on our Duelist Kingdom deck rankings. We've seen some crazy strategies from Weevil's Bug Army to Pegasus's Toon Takeover. But what really made decks shine in this tournament? It wasn't just about raw power, it was consistency, adaptability, and those game-changing key cards that played huge roles throughout. Now, I want to hear from you. Did your top 5 match ours? Did Joey's luck-based tactics impress you more than Mai's Harpy dominance? Or maybe you think Kaiba's Blue Eyes beatdown was unbeatable? Let me know in the comments. And I want to say a huge thank you to Blue and Delta from YGO Anime Games for joining me on this one. Make sure to check them out. Link to their channel is in the description below. And if you want to learn some really cool things about Yugi's Duelist Kingdom deck, you won't want to miss this video going over 141 facts about the deck that crowned him the King of Games. I'll see you over there. Take care. Peace, peace.